Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this session, a special session dedicated to cities and as critical as accelerators for climate action, how to integrate adaptation and mitigation through urban planning. Urban planning is the key point perspective of this session. We have different guests, different speakers in our session, coming from different sectors of the civil society, networks, cities, and that have a wide experience in collaboration with local authorities and private sector within the public and local authorities. One of the main questions I wish to start is how we can use urban planning as a key perspective to pass adaptation at the local level. In our perspective, the idea is that urban planning is something that all local authorities in different parts of the world, despite where we are, have to implement. And in this sense, could be a way to avoid to remain in the voluntary-based approach that in many cases climate adaptation is still related. Because not in all legislation system, the climate adaptation is something compulsory below. So the idea that urban planning can play a fundamental role to implement adaptation, both on the side of strategic vision, both on the side of regulation of land use, regulation of activities, regulation of networks within the urban areas. All aspects that urban planning can fundamentally support in local authorities. I wish to introduce very briefly our guests, starting from the side. We have Miroslav Polcer from a strategic director of GLOCHA, that is a network of public and civil society, but all the guests will explain a little bit better something about the institution they come from. That could be useful also to have a view to all the people that are listening the session. Then we have Goksen Sahin, Senior Advocacy Officer for Local Government and Sustainability from ICLEI, that is a relevant global network supporting local authorities. Then we have Alejandro Garcia, Environmental Councillor of Valladolid City Council, experience of local authorities in this sense. Then we have Jerusalem Hernandez from KPMG, that is another network more oriented to the private sector that have a strong collaboration with local authorities too. And then we have Ansul Abbasi, architect and urban regeneration expert from Indian Institute of Urban Affairs. I'm Francesco Musco, I'm full professor of urban planning at University of Venice, and I coordinate a research group dedicated to planning for adaptation in local cities, local level, since a few years. I would like to start with Miroslav Polcer from the strategic director of GLOCHA. Also, in your perspective, in which way urban planning can contribute? In your experience, you have a lot of experience on cooperation project, a network of local authorities and private sector and civil society. In your perspective, in your experience, how urban aspect can contribute to adaptation?
Thank you very much, Francesco. First, thank you and congratulations to the Spanish pavilion at COP29 and especially to Elena for convening such a timely discussion. So, the full name of my organization, GLOCHA, is International Association for the Advancement of Innovative Approaches to Global Challenges. And from the name, you can already imagine we are systems thinkers. So we are looking how these global challenges, climate change and sustainable development goals implementation and whatever there might come, how can we really have a more effective and appropriate response to these challenges and how do we organize society on the different levels of governance. And we see we have the Paris Agreement, and implementation is lagging behind. And our answer to this is that we are saying there's a need to have all of society engaged in the formulation of goals, in identifying challenges, and then to addressing them with appropriate action. And it's clear that the local level, the cities level, is the governance level in which we are closest to the real natural resources, the natural capital, our basis for life, and also we are closest to the real needs and action potentials of the people. And so talking about urban planning, it's my perspective, from the system's perspective, is not about a department in the city administration, but it's about how can all those who are in a city get a shared understanding of desirable futures. And therefore also foresight activities and this kind of exercises to really combining top-down goals, Paris Agreement, climate neutrality goals with the needs and the action potentials and the emotions also of the people. How can this really be put together that we are building a good life for all? And my organization has developed in the context of an EU Interreg Central Europe project, Just Energy Transition for Central Europe, JET4CE, a project, a platform. It's called Challenges Mapping. And that's our systemic solution, which we believe can really help on many governance levels, but especially on the city level, to connect the knowledge, the creativity and the needs of the citizens with city administration and urban planning. And the idea is that and we have this pilot version of the tool, that people can go in their neighborhood and identify challenges and action potentials. In regards to just energy transition is the tool that we have now, but it's a universal tool. It can be a tool, challenges mapping in relation to the common good on the local level, and connected with the global level. And we are working on this.
About this, I wish just to ask a few things, because it's very good experience, this one that you mentioned, the role of citizen, the neighborhood as a play also to observe a solution. In this kind of project, the Interreg and cooperation project, in which way the municipalities have been involved in this case, for example? So, because at the very end, the solution could be implemented by the city council.
Yes. So we had in our project, it was this Interreg Central Europe project. There the subnational governments, the regions are the main players. But we are also speaking with the city administration of Klagenfurt, which is an EU mission city, EU mission for climate neutral smart cities, with ambitious climate neutrality goals, and also our partners in Slovenia, in Ljubljana, Gran, and Velenje. They are the three EU mission cities in Slovenia. We are looking how this tool can be used by EU mission cities to come to ideas how really to radically decarbonize the cities by having the action potentials and the resources of all stakeholders engaged.
Thank you very much. I would ask the same question to Gosen Sahin from ICLEI. ICLEI is one of the worldwide network of local authorities dedicated to sustainability since a long time. Also, in your perspective, that work mainly with local authorities, in which way the contribution of urban planning has been played or could play a better role also in the next future, also in comparison with the past?
So I will start presenting ICLEI. So ICLEI is the global network of towns, cities, regions, and subnational governments. And we work in over 120 countries, and we have members we have, I think, over 2,500 members right now. So we work with cities and regions in very different ways. In Europe, we are part of we are supporting cities in the mission, we are supporting cities in the, regions in the adaptation mission, and also cities in the adaptation mission. But also, we are the focal point of the local government constituency in the UNFCCC negotiations, so we try to also bring the role of cities in the negotiations and the role of subnational governments, because now what we are discussing here is mostly a little bit about climate finance. It's about kind of what is the role of urbanization in the mitigation action, but all of these big top-level discussions actually come together in a holistic way and implemented at the local level, at the neighborhood level. So that the transition starts from home and it ends at home. So it is like we need to think a little bit from top down, but also bottom up in how things are designed. I think what is important is that what I have been observing in these negotiations is that the role of subnationals are very much recognized. Today is the Urbanization Day in the COP, and we opened the day with the Urbanization and Climate Action Ministerial. A long list of national governments that we couldn't go through the whole list because the time didn't allow, recognized the key role of subnationals in accelerating climate action. And many national governments highlighted that we need to future-proof our way of thinking about cities and neighborhoods. This also goes through how we are planning the future of our cities. We cannot only think about, for example, one aspect. We cannot only think about adaptation. We need to think about adaptation and then nature-based solutions, and then how nature-based solutions can also help with the mitigation and how we can create more circular systems in the city and close the loops. So actually we are going towards a place where at the international level, the discussions are coming together, coming together around the topic of how we create synergies between UN Climate Convention, Biodiversity Convention, and SDGs, and then from there, coming down to the to the local level, to our neighborhood level, it is coming together how we design the cities in a way that we are ready for interconnected and unexpected situations, like the kind of climate impacts, but also how we kind of create circular loops to make sure that we can also create a bit more self-sufficient cities and better livelihoods. So this is, I think, there is a key role to play. In each, we have these 5 pathways, and we always say that whatever the angle, and they are kind of the net zero. Do you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Sorry. I should. Okay. Oh, no, it's. Sorry. Hope you hear me now. Yeah. Okay. So we say that it's like cities can start from net zero emission pathway. They might, and we have a emission city, so who will speak after me, so they will explain how to reach the climate neutrality. But you can start from the building a resilient city, or building a circular city, or building a more fair and just city angle. But at the end, all of those approaches come together and build a more holistic transformation pathway. And the urban planning plays a key role in designing these future-proof cities. And with that, I think I will leave the floor to you to explain how to design all of those at the city level.
Thank you very much, Gossan, because you introduced exactly one of the elements that is fundamental, the circularities of solutions that has to be kept together. And the umbrella of urban planning system could be a way to coordinate the measures to guarantee a global efficacy of the measures. Because one of the risks of adaptation sometimes is that we take a consideration to the single solution without understanding that has to work in the whole, at least looking at the urban area entirely. So this would be fundamental, having also the vision of Alejandro Garcia, that is environmental counselor of Valladolid City Council in Spain. Another point that, apart from repeating the general question relating our relationship with adaptation and urban planning, in my point of view, could be fundamental the role of medium-sized local authorities. Medium-sized local authorities, not just the big cities involved in the process. A few years ago, with ICLEI, we prepared a book that's been published by Springer, dedicated exactly to the role of middle-sized local authorities. It's fundamental because the world is made of medium-sized local authorities apart from the biggest city. So Alejandro, in your experience as city councillor, that use the political side that has to implement solutions at the very end, how this kind of experience connected to urban planning can find a place to be operative, despite of the legal framework problems that in any system there are.
First of all, hello everyone, and also I want to congratulate the Spanish team with Elena and Eva and everyone here for this great work during these 2 weeks. Okay, this is the point of view of a council. I'm just councillor for 1 year and a half. I come from the private sector, so I have both views of the city as a citizen and now as a politician. I think that the city of Valladolid, as you told, is a medium-sized city, and it could be a good example to be copied later by bigger cities or even smaller cities. We are in this. We got this mission label last year from the European Mission, and with many different projects in work to be carbon neutral by the 2030. The best thing of what we want in a city is being on the side of the citizen. Okay, how I'd like to be in my city. I would like to have a 15-minute city, a 20-minute city. We see that our city, you can control the city. The city is not controlling you like Madrid or big urban areas. We have an urban plan from 4 years ago, so it's very new, and it was updated, and we make a compact city in this urban plan. So the city is it has two rings around, so you cannot develop new housing areas out of the rings. So on that way, we want to keep all the urban area inside the ring. So you have these compact areas, and we have different constructions. We have big buildings, but not tall, but 5, 6 level, and then on the south area of the city, these individual houses. But I prefer, or I think that it's better to have more density in these areas, because then you can give services to the citizens. When you have big areas without density, it's very difficult. You have no commerce, you have difficult to have a school, to have a health center. So I think that people think about that before choosing the place to live. Also, we are trying to develop this urban heating district in all the city with the regional government. That will change the life of many. 60,000 families will have this urban heating in a few years. That is a big change for a southern city, because in the north of Europe is something common. In Denmark, you have many cities with this district heating, but for us it's something new, and the people are learning what it is because they have the works on the street, so they don't know what is happening in this street. Okay, we are making your life better for the future. So this kind of actions will help also the people to understand what is the mission level. So all the work turns around in the city of these zero emissions by 2030.
Thanks a lot. Yes, to put in practice the solution, also another point could be related to the fact that it takes time because also a district for heating system takes years to be implemented. Yeah. So just to finalize the perspective in this sense of local authorities, how the timeline of the implementation of a solution is related also to your term, because your term is shorter. Yeah.
Yeah, for example, what we say that this work we are doing right now was started for another political party, for a different color, but our mayor said always that this is not a question of colors. Decarbonization or be carbon neutral, it's a way of thinking that can help everyone to have a better life. We have a better city and also a better world. So it's not a question of colors.
Fundamental perspective.
So it was started few years ago. Now it's our turn for these 4 years, and someone else, maybe me, someone else will continue the work in 3 years' time. So the global heating system is going to take 10 years to be developed. So it's 200 kilometers of tunnels all around the city. So the citizen needs to understand that few months of disturbing his life, it will be good for the next 100 years. Yeah. So time is good because many people will be concerned from different colors, but also we ask for patience to the citizens to wait for the result.
Thank you very much, Alejandro. It's a fundamental perspective also to balance the long-term solution and the capacity of different, how can I say, political terms to keep on the solutions, especially at the local level, because at part the global decisions is fundamental, the last mile of implementation, adaptation. To add another perspective, would ask also to Jerusalem Hernandez that she's part of KPMG. This is a network that works mainly with private sector in collaboration with also with local authorities. Maybe Jerusalem, apart stressing your perspective on the role of urban planning connected also to the management of adaptation, a few words also on KPMG, just to understand the difference to have as primary collaboration with private sector.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you for all of you, and of course for the Spanish pavilion, that we feel at home always in this Spanish pavilion. And I can agree more with my colleagues in this table about the relevance of making a very whole vision and integrity about the question. But it's very important to take into account the private sector in this conversation, because in the integration of all the aspects that are necessary for to achieve more sustainable cities, it's very important to take into account different aspects: the services, water, infrastructure, the stakeholder engagement, for example, is a very important aspect too. So in KPMG, we work with companies, but we work with local communities too, to help them to adapt their models or management models to the new trends or to the new aspects that are necessary for the future. And sometimes we prepare reports. I am an advisor. I go with a report under my arm all the day, but we have prepared some different reports related to the sustainable cities and net zero in cities. And 2 years ago, we found different, I think, important aspects that are helping us to advise better to companies to achieve the objectives of the cities. So, for example, we analyze the technology is very important, and technology is about private sector, and we analyze the climate finance. So it's very important to have projects, bankable projects, and it's not only a question about political volunteers, it's about finance too, and how can we do all these projects, bankable projects, investable projects, and it's very, very important the equity and inclusive climate solutions and climate action. Equity is one of the most important aspects when we are speaking about cities of the future. So we need to take into account equity when we are planning new cities for the future. And climate governance, of course, and Valladolid is a very good example of these aspects. And one other thing related to all the productive sectors, consumption and lifestyle changes. How can we offer different tools to engage our societies, to engage different clusters of societies that we have in our cities, to include them in the conversation and to give them new tools to understand the world in a different way. So, well, maybe we can go in deep of some of these aspects in the future.
Thank you very much. I think we can say for the next turn some perspective. It's absolutely fundamental the point of view of financial capacity. It's not just a matter of public finance. Our private sector can contribute with mutual interest for obviously to invest, but also to have a public return in terms of advantage for quality of life, the aspect of improvement of the urban areas, the aspect to save energies. And at that point, Jerusalem, another point that you introduced that could be absolutely fundamental is the influence of all reproductive sector. It's not just a matter of the enterprise dedicated to building stock. All the system, all the try to aspect related to food chain, the aspect of mobility, the aspect dedicated to habits, have a direct and indirect influence on the climate, I can say, general policy of a specific place.
Of course. You only need to think about a city and what do you do in a city. So maybe you need mobility, and you need energy, you need cooling, you need building, you need health system and health centers, education, to enjoy life too. So we have an entertainment sector very implicated too, and a lot of different services. And it's very important to have the right infrastructure, the right energy systems, the right urbanization models, and a lot of different aspects of this question are related to private solutions. And companies must be engaged with local partners to design these kind of private solutions for the citizenships.
This is a fundamental point, because also the definition of private proposals also. Because in many cases the collaboration with local authority is based on the private sector that make proposal. Urban planning is full of initiatives deriving from private that could be shared in terms of objective aims with local authorities. In this sense, I would ask to Ansul Abbasi, that is an architect in urban regeneration, but coming from the Indian Institute of Urban Affairs, so the role of the state in this case to promote proper policies also for urban areas that can include adaptation or in general increasing of urban sustainability. Which is your perspective in this sense, also based on your experience?
Thank you so much. Good afternoon for having me here, and thank you to the Spanish team. I belong to Climate Center for Cities at the National Institute of Urban Affairs in India. We are a think tank to the Ministry of Urban Development, and we were institutionalized with the major mandate to develop a climate ecosystem, a 360-degree climate approach, and as the name suggests, Climate Center for Cities, so a 360-degree climate ecosystem for cities. And by the ecosystem, I mean right from the framework, having an understanding of the baseline, where do cities stand. So we have something known as Climate Smart Cities Assessment Framework in India. It's a framework based on both mitigation and adaptation aspects. It has 5 themes covering all the points, as you mentioned: urban planning, green cover, energy, mobility, water and waste management. And we recently did the 3rd phase of the assessment, where 226 cities participated. So we have an understanding that where do cities stand. This can lead us towards a systemic way of policy formulation, project implementation, and understanding the financial needs of cities. So as a part of the whole ecosystem, moving from the framework to policies, what we have done recently, we developed the long-term low-emission development strategy. India has committed to go net zero by 2070, and we contributed in terms of material efficiency, energy efficiency of buildings, and most importantly, urban planning. So till date, the kind of master plans which Indian cities were preparing, they somewhere did not have the climate consideration into them. That's where the major push through the policy, the LT-LEDs, or the National Mission on Sustainable Habitat we're trying to do is we are trying to bring in climate and disaster entry points to the master planning guideline. We have something known as URDP5 guidelines, that is urban regional development planning guidelines for cities. The most importantly, if we introduce these entry points there, we eventually save a lot of emissions right there. Apart from that, while we are developing these guidelines, it's also important to demonstrate some pilot projects. So we did climate action plan for 4 cities in India, ranging from a very small city with a population of maybe 45,000, medium cities and large cities. These are demonstration projects for cities to understand that how they can bring in climate into planning. It's kind of a toolkit. So what would be the emission scenario by 2050, by 2070, short term, long term, and what would be the repercussions? I think the major gap which lies in India or maybe in other areas globally is that people understand climate change, that what is going to be the impact in terms of human life, but they're not able to translate that impact on cities. I think that is where scientific inquiry is needed, and scientific models, climate models are needed to exactly understand the repercussions on ground. And I think that's where we as an organization are trying that can we come up with projects, schemes, missions. So another step is that we are introducing disaster lens at all our missions, schemes and programs of the Urban Development Ministry right at the inception stage. So all the RFPs will have those climate considerations by default in them. This burdens down the effort of cities. I think there is too much burden on Indian cities. I'll just talk about the Indian context. They were not planned or they did not have the capacity to implement climate actions. So that's where a lot of work is happening towards building that capacity. And I think this is for now, and maybe I can add on future. And looking forward to connect with you, maybe offline, to talk more about the work we're doing. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Sorry, there's some some chorus. Now, you introduced some other fundamental aspect. You mentioned the activities of consolidation of the climate consideration within the master planning. That's a fundamental point, because especially as a national authority, sorry about that, but it is, yes. From the as a national authority, part of a government, is absolutely fundamental to support local authorities to improve solution. Also the small and medium-sized local authorities that probably not always can have the capacity, also from the the know-how to implement solutions. So the providing guidelines to support improvement master planning. And then another point that you introduced is absolutely fundamental, that is the comprehension of the adaptation at city level. Despite we can understand the global change, the local level is strictly connected also to aspect of extreme weather climate events, the disaster in this sense, that are extremization of phenomena that have an immediate effect, despite what can happen in 100 years, for example. So this aspect, in your point of view, how can be strengthened more in the system, into the system?
I think that's again a long process, but if we fundamentally divide it into steps, it becomes easier. So I think if we see the climate journey in 3 phases, short term, mid-term and long term, quite a lot of things become easy. For example, be it any action. It could be decarbonization of buildings, having a water management system, or NMT network. There needs to be a approach, and that's a scientific approach which can be followed. First thing is that for all these actions to happen, there need to be first a realization that there is an issue. The second thing is having the right institutional mechanism. So for example, if there needs to be a biodiversity management plan, there should be at ULB some sort of a biodiversity management committee. Similarly, for disaster resilience, ULB should have some institution which is responsible for doing this. So that becomes a second step. The third step is there is need of a plan. And these are the action plans, not just the research documents, which are maybe not actionable. And what I mean by actionable is there should be a component of responsibility matrix as well as financing, that how the cities can implement them, from where the funds can come. A good capacity building is the next step in terms of not just the technical. A lot of capacity building globally is happening on the technical side, but very less on the financial side. What ULBs need is to have this understanding that how they can use their own funds, from where they can bring in funds, what are the technical requirements for the project preparation. I think that is the next step. And most important step is the allocation of budgets. I think no matter how our ULBs or no matter how ecosystem we prepare, until and unless there is some budget allocation mandated or proposed, the actions would not come into reality. And last but not the least of the approach which I was talking about is the monitoring and evaluation. It's not a one-time job that we have done it. Until and unless we monitor, I think whatever we are looking at the midterm might go totally wrong if the short-term measures have not been implemented correctly. So I think this is the kind of approach which we have been following, and I kind of promote it for other countries to follow up. And maybe if my peers have anything to add to it, look forward to listen to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. You stimulated a couple of question more that I will ask to our guests, and then opening some discussion also with the participant at the session. The question is for Alejandro in this case. The aspect of budget, the definition of public expenditure budget is fundamental. How, in your perspective, has been changing, also in your 1.5 year experience as councillor? The discussion of budget and allocation of resources, and then the interrelation between and among the sectors within the local authorities. You are councillor for environment, but how dialoguing with the budget councillor and the urban planning councillor or the other sector, and also with the mayor, because that's usually the general vision?
Okay, the first of all is that the whole team is concerned with this subject. So all, from the mayor to all the councillors, we work in and push in the same direction. So that helps. And that's a point, that the financial problem, not in the public part, but in the private part. In Valladolid, we made an estimation of 1,500 million euros of investment in these 7 years to be carbon neutral. 85% from the private sector, and the other 17% from the public sector. So our side is not so difficult, because in your annual budget, you put the money on the projects that help to reach the goal. But on the private sector is more difficult. First of all, because they don't know what to do. They are lost. So what we are doing, we started with a decarbonization plan for companies. So we choose 10 different companies from all sectors and all sizes, because in this case it's opposite of what we are doing as a city. We are a medium-sized city. That will be an example for the future for bigger cities, but on the private area, we think that the big industry is doing their plans and they are working well. Like we have a Renault factory or a Michelin factory, so they have their own plans, but the small companies are the ones that are having the problems to do that decarbonization. So I need that. We have to work in our budget as a city, but also we have to help all this private sector to do their work with funds or making alliance with them to make easier this work.
You stress another point that is fundamental. I go back to Jerusalem in this case. In which way we can support the private to accomplish also the expectation of local authorities, based on the fact that the balance between private and public investment is stronger on the private sector, but the public can coordinate the investors. So
I understand the public position, but sometimes the problem is the narratives and the equity story about how are you doing your work in terms of decarbonization and which is the sense in terms of finance for this project. So I agree with you, sometimes banks or different financiers, the capital providers usually work with private sector, and sometimes they are not prepared to understand the public perspective, but the same occurs in the other side. Sometimes the public sector is not speaking the correct or the right language when we go to a bank or when we go to an investor. Investors are looking for sustainable projects all the time. So if you have a very good sustainable project, they are going to give their support. But maybe the narrative and as I said before, the equity story, the sustainable equity story is not the right in this case. So it's very, very important to give the indicators, to give the information about the revenue in the future, and to give the evaluation of the impact, not only in terms of finance, but finance is very, very important to have the indicators, but in terms of developments, for example, or in terms of carbon footprint, or in terms of human rights too. In a city, we must take into account human rights too. So at the end, I think it's a question about narratives and indicators and the right evaluation. Risk and opportunities is the language of capital providers, and we must remember that.
Yeah, and we have to show that this is an investment, it's not a cost in a company. So once we understand that, that will be easier.
I want to add on this because I think we work with cities, especially with the mission cities right now, to create this better funding dialogues at the national level on how to mobilize this private finance for cities. And we see very much that there is a kind of the language disconnect, but also there's a very kind of clear challenge for cities. It is a transaction cost. That is kind of the private finance is expensive. And if we want to decarbonize, then the private finance should be accessible for cities also. There is, I think, kind of this, and we need to use all the leverage of the public finance, which means kind of the national budget, the local level budget, to be able to leverage more financing. So I think it's in the financing place, so the public procurement plays a key role to give a clear signal to the local businesses to make sure that, okay, we will buy from you if you follow these standards and then these kind of you follow our mission perspective. That is an enabler, but also at the national level, we need other enablers to make sure that the private finance reaches to local level. And it is, I mean, we in the mission, all the cities develop these climate city contracts, and in the climate city contracts, there are a lot of kind of investable projects. Now, those cities need the backing of their national governments to push the private finance to invest. Investing in public authorities should already be a guarantee for the investors that these money should come there because it's a kind of solid and long-term investment. So I think there, and I will connect it back to the kind of these negotiations place, I think creating this policy framework and policy enablers that you were also mentioning, it is very crucial to make sure that the mission succeeds and also it inspires a whole transition across Europe.
Goxen, you introduce another perspective that is fundamental because of the policy framework operates at different levels. You know? That it's not just a matter of what can do the municipality. The municipality can provide, can design a proper urban planning tools to favor some kind of investment, to favor and to attract under certain rules. At the same time, some kind of policy framework are decided at national level, or in some cases, if you look at European Union level. So especially looking at how to implement nationally specific directive, how to implement the national adaptation plans that in most of the cases are not so effectful in terms to support new kind of policies. So in this sense, in your experience of ICLEI, that you make also knowledge transfer for the municipalities. You had in the recent years some, how can I say, improvement on the aspect of involvement of the private sector in the initiatives. And the same question could be extended to Jerusalem, because in the two, looking at the two sides, from public to private to private to public.
So from ICLEI side, we kind of, I think 4 years ago, or maybe even more, we started having this local Green Deal approach. So the city is going through all of their strategic plans, putting all of their targets in one document, and going to all of their key stakeholders, which is a whole of governance approach, the businesses, but also NGOs, and sitting together with them to discuss who is going to do what. So that is a little bit kind of, and who is going to kind of contribute in which sense, and it's a local Green Deal. And at the end of it, once the agreement is reached, it is a deal. It is signed by all parties. And it mobilizes also all the private sector towards the same approach that the city is taking. So I think that is a key thing, and the many cities learn from each other. We see from cities like Mannheim now bringing this approach to a more citizen level, meaning they are doing kind of citizen level deals, like how much the citizens will kind of commit to reduce their scope 3 emissions from public transport, from consumption and so on, and then the city is taking all of those into account. So there is a lot of learning that's happening in that space. But on the other hand, as you mentioned, the EU legislation, which brings several obligations to the local level, like in the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, the cities who have over 80,000 population needs to have one-stop shops for to support cities. And on the other hand, we have a number of legislation that is because of the design of the policy, which is very top-down. When it comes to the implementation level, there are challenges. And those challenges need to be facilitated and addressed by the national level. And it can only happen through kind of creating this enabling conditions, meaning increasing the capacity of local governments. Together with other city networks and organizations, we did a study, Local Capacity for Climate. And according to that study, we need 1.5 additional person per municipality in Europe to manage the energy transition, which means in total 16 billion additional budgets per year until 2030. I mean, we know how much the public budget is stretched. We cannot ask cities to kind of address this. So we need to make sure that we have this enabling, maybe kind of contracts with academia to provide that stuff or support capacity building, maybe additional national budgets coming to the local level. But we need a much more close collaboration between local, regional, and national level to make sure that the EU legislation is implemented and in a way that everybody benefits. So the cities can also kind of design redistribution of those benefits to the citizens.
Yeah, and I think it's very important to establish an ecosystem, and some of have spoken about that, but we are managing in isolated, focused, and it's very important to manage with an ecosystem in which you could include all the different agents, all the different stakeholders. Of course, in the private view, we must establish the different synergies that we can do when we speak about, for example, public transport, and what about green zones, and what about the energy efficiency. And we've spoken about Europe, but renovation wave is a challenge for cities in Spain, for example, that we have very old buildings and very protected buildings too. So we have a lot of challenges that we must face together but not in words, but in ecosystems that work together. And I'm not sure that the municipalities was thinking in ecosystems, because sometimes they have limited resources and they start step by step. But at least for the design of the model, we must work together and work in hubs or trying to adapt our models for make the most of the synergies.
Thanks. Thanks. No, this is fundamental also the definition of a common ecosystem in which all the elements can contribute. And the last...
Only one example, for example, the roads or the infrastructures, when you speak with, for transport and for communication. And we must think about intelligence, smart models, or maybe waste.
Yeah.
And we must think in all together.
And in this sense, Ansel, you stress the aspect of policy design, also a part of the urban planning, the master planning. And the policy design, when is considering in a multi-level approach, from global to national to local and vice versa. How works in your experience? Last comment, and then we open it to if there are any questions from the public.
I think looking at the Indian scenario, what's really important is a mid-level. We have the national government, then we have the state or the provincial level, and then we have the city. Urban planning is a state subject. So I think that's where the most of the work is needed. While the center is there to develop this ecosystem in terms of financing, in terms of guidelines for master plans, I think it is the role of the states, because a lot of functions, if you look at a city level, especially in India, they're all state governed, be it pollution, disaster, transportation. These are all parastatal agencies. So a lot of emissions and adaptation, which would be a part of a climate action plan or a master plan of a city, they are directly under the ambit of the state. So that's where, if the action at the state level in terms of the capacity building, financing, major investment measures through PPPs, and developing systems of incorporating the private players, connecting with academia. So at NIO, we started with something known as capacity grid. We include academia and we try to connect it to the cities, so that they provide support to the city governments, while on the other hand there are students who are looking for on-ground actions and real life examples. So that's the kind of connect we have done. And then only thing that remains with city is they need to be implementing agencies. So at NIO, what we have done is the next step after developing the climate action plans, how these actions would be implemented. We are coming up with a project preparation facility for both mitigation and adaptation projects, wherein this is kind of a dashboard for cities for them to understand for which action, what kind of financing they can go for. So there's a lot of waste of money. Maybe someone can get a funding through a research-based fund, and they might go for carbon credits for the same thing. And at times, maybe they want to go for carbon credits, but they do not have the enough documentation for credit worthiness. I think that is the role of center and state, and the role of cities only remains limited to use this knowledge and get things implemented. If we expect everything from cities with just mere guidelines and some capacity building, which might not help them, this loop is going to continue. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Emerged very different, very rich feedback from your experiences. I don't know if there are any short questions. Yeah, probably you need a microphone. Maybe just introduce from one word yourself, just to.
Well, my name is Valentin Alfaya from Ferrovial, a global infrastructure company, as well as member of the Climate Kick. I'm a member of the governing board of Climate Kick. My point is regarding precisely the engagement with the private sector. I think it's very relevant to attract and to align the decarbonization roadmaps of the companies in the private sector with the whole city. Congratulations, by the way, to Alejandro, because you presented last week as far as I know, the so-called ambassadors of the mission in Valladolid. A very good point. But my point is that it's much more challenging how to attract the private sector as long-term partnerships, long-term partners for the projects. In that sense, I think, well, narratives are relevant and so on, yes. But the most relevant point is to have at least more visibility from the private sector of the decarbonization roadmaps of the cities in the context of the missions and the projects, whether, if you want, enough detail in order to attract technology, private funding, and long-term partnerships with the private sector. For example, my company manages the district heating in several neighborhoods in Madrid, 100% private sector. So this is the way, in my view. I asked my colleagues at the CTS 2030 platform in Spain to provide just visibility of the projects behind the roadmaps. Could be a very good starting point, in my view, to attract significantly and this partnership we need with the private sector. Most of all, we have to fund by 85%, around 85% from private sector these actions. Thank you.
Thanks. It's a crucial point, also the aspect of visibility of a project, of investment, also as a good example and practice to be extended.
Okay, I think it's what I told before, that people, they don't know what is this decarbonization or this mission. We have several cities, so that's why we have this ambassadors net that we try to reach private sector and also the citizens. Also, we are trying to use sport and culture to tell the people what we are doing in the city. Yesterday we were speaking about what we do with the Real Valladolid, the soccer club, and also we have music and concerts regarding this. Last summer we had Music Under the Sun. That was a carbon neutral concert. So all the instruments and the sound system was fitted by solar panels and also by bicycles. People were riding a bicycle, generating electricity to make the music play. So we try to do these kind of things to teach the people what we are doing. So I think it's also important to do something similar with the private projects and investments, so people will start to understand what we are doing, and that's the best, because they will tell each other. So it's what we need to tell the world all these efforts we are doing from governments, from nations, to make better way of life for everyone.
Okay, thank you very much. I think our time is finished. I really thanks all our speakers and guests, and thanks also Elena Lopez-Gan for supporting the organization of this seminar. Thanks also to Spanish Pavilion.
Thank you.